Good morning. Welcome back to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. We've been talking about estate planning this morning, and with me, my good friend and special guest, Russ Cook, with Russ Cook and Associates over in Brentwood, Tennessee. And Russ, we were talking just before the break about utilizing trusts with IRAs. And one of the things there when it comes to planning is understanding, again, the tax implications. A good comprehensive plan, of course, we're taking in all these things into consideration. We're looking at what your investments are going to do. We're looking at rates of return, risk and investment. How can we minimize risk? How we can increase returns? Taxes when we're taking money out in retirement, out of those retirement accounts. How can we minimize, of course, the taxes? Social Security plays into that. How do we minimize taxes on Social Security at the same time? Because these all tie in together. And sometimes when you're looking to do one thing, you create a problem over here. Maybe you're taking out some monies, for instance, out of retirement accounts for the purpose of paying off a home or some such thing, and yet not considering that when you take out a large lump sum, it's all going to be taxable income, and it's going to impact your Social Security taxes. It's going to impact Medicare. It could cause your Medicare premiums to go up. So there are a lot of other things that happen, and there are ways with good planning where you can accomplish all your goals, but do it in such a way to minimize these risks and taxes. Another area when we're talking about IRAs is as far as minimizing taxes is how much you have to take out. So at 70.5 on an IRA, you've got what are called required minimum distributions. And a divisor comes in at about 3.7, 3.75 to start, and then it goes up each year, the amounts that you need to take out. So one of the things that we look there is how can we want to be able to stretch it. Now we can take more, but we know that that's going to be taxable dollars, and we want to plan to minimize that. Now sometimes we plan in such a way we're doing Roth conversions. We're implementing all these different strategies, all with the goal of getting the most with the least risk, and at the same time minimizing taxes through the process. Now with that, if you're leaving money to a child, all right, an inherited IRA is an example, and we were talking about the benefits of using a trust for asset protection, and that's a big strong plus, right? But now what's the other part? The other part has to do with the taxation of those dollars. So if not done correctly, this is, Russ, where we get into problems. So a trust can be great, but if the language is not done properly, now we could trigger a rule that basically is going to cause them to have to pay more tax potentially.
Yeah, you don't want to set up an estate plan where you're creating a tax issue. And whenever we're doing estate planning for clients that have a lot of retirement account assets, we want to make sure that not only are we protecting those assets as they go down to the next generation, but we're also not forcing any additional tax if possible. And the way the IRA rules work, or 401k rules, I guess it convert to an IRA, is that when a person passes, if those assets go to a beneficiary, a person, then there's ability to stretch out how much they have to take over their life expectancy. That way you're not paying tax on all those monies at once, you're paying it over time. When you have an asset like that go to a trust, typically a trust is not a person, and so the government says if it goes to a trust, you're either forced to take it out over the RMD period that the decedent had if they're 70.5 and had started taking RMDs out, required minimum distributions, or there's a 5-year rule where you can stretch it out over 5 years. However, if you set up the trust right, then you can still use the beneficiary's age as the age for calculating the payouts. That's what's called a stretch trust. And you just have to know that that language has to be in there in order to get that benefit. So it's just another method of estate planning that we try to adhere to.
This is one of the areas. Think of it this way: when you're doing planning, we have all these different things that we're trying to balance out, all these different provisions within our planning. So for instance, in investments, we want to get the best return we can, okay? But we don't want to have so much risk, all right, that we potentially go through a period. Imagine this: you've got the last 2 bear markets, and now we're in the longest bull market in history. Okay, so we may have forgotten that if we go back more than 10 years, so over the last 10 years, the market's averaged something like 12–13% a year for 10 years. Phenomenal returns, hadn't seen since the 80s and 90s. So this is great. Now, in the 80s and 90s being the 2 biggest back-to-back decades in the history of the market. But then we had 2000 through 2009. Okay, so if you remember that period, 2000 through 2002, the market dropped like 45%. So imagine you've got $1 million, and now all of a sudden that $1 million looks a lot like $550,000 instead, maybe 600 because of the way that drop occurred. So now I got $600,000 of my million. Not a good way to start my retirement. In fact, that might be a good way to lose. Think about if I'm heading into retirement, and unfortunately I'm going to have a period like that, 2000 through 2002. Tony Robbins talked about in his book, he did a great example showing the difference between, and it's called sequence of returns risk, and this is how this plays in, is that you go into a bear market, it can be the difference between running out of money and having plenty of money. And it's all, since we don't know when we're retiring if we're going into a bear market or a bull market, and where we've had already the longest bull market in history, how long might this stick around, right? Who knows? No one has a crystal ball for that. A year, 2 years, 3 years? Whatever it is, the best planning is going to be that takes into consideration whatever happens, you're going to be protected, okay? So you're going to look at your investment portfolio and you're going to say, yes, I want to make whatever that needed rate of return is to be able to attain and maintain your standard of living and quality of life no matter how long you live. But then also, what's the cost of those investments? Now, when you get into cost and taxes on your investments, risk, volatility, all of those things have to be balanced out. Okay, I want to pay attention to returns, but I'm not going to drive that returns, you know, get so worried about it that I'm pushing too aggressively, and in a bear market have so much volatility or such a high standard deviation in my portfolio that I lose 40 or 50% of my money. And it takes me 5 years, let's say, to recover. Now you're looking at a period like we're talking about with 2000 through 2009, where you actually had 10 years where you ended up with less money, okay? And if you invested in, let's say, an S&P 500 index fund, you would have had less money, okay, at the end of that 10 years than at the beginning. All right, and if you were taking out money, now imagine you were taking out 5% a year as well. Now you've got half as much money. Not only did you lose money, but you also took out, and you're down to less than half of what you started with. And if you add in for inflation and the purchasing power of your dollars and what happens there, it's even sadder in terms of what that looks like. And the ability to be able to maintain your standard of living, and potentially the high risk of running out of money. And what do you do? And imagine that, right? You're 10 years into retirement, and you've got that specter looming before you. There are ways to protect yourself, and it's just like with estate planning when we talk about these different things. This is the same concept. So a trust is great for asset protection, but we need to make sure the language is there to preserve the stretch so we can still minimize taxes and control what that tax bite's going to be over the years that you're going to have those IRAs, okay? And this goes for you and then for the next generation and the next generation potentially as well. So it's important to have that language. Imagine if you don't have the right language in there, the trust rules, if the trust is the beneficiary and doesn't have a look through to a beneficiary, a real person, now you got a 5-year payout. 20% of that coming out every year instead of, you know, maybe 1/4 of that. So this is now that you've created some additional taxes, maybe pushes you into higher brackets and creates some real tax issues. What happens? Well, unfortunately, the only one that wins is the IRS. Okay, they get a lot more money and your family gets a lot less, all because of poor planning. So one of the things that'll make it easy for you on the planning piece of this, maybe take a look at your situation, is for the first 10 callers to my office this morning, 615-376-5325. If you would like us to take a look at yours, get a free retirement income analysis, and what we're looking at is a comprehensive financial plan that I will help you with. I'll help create for you, in fact. We'll look at your investments, at Social Security questions, Medicare questions. We'll talk about estate planning, of course, tax planning, all of it in together. I'll do up reports for you, again, for an investment analysis and also to show you your financial future based on the things you're doing today, and then share strategies with you on how to improve that. And guess what? We can also do this estate planning. You want to bring your estate planning documents in. Russ is being very generous. He normally charges how much for a consult?
$375.
$375 to come in and talk to him about that. If you come through this offer, you can come in and Russ will come meet with us. We can meet all of us together at no cost to you. So if you want to take advantage of that, again, first 10 callers, 615 376-5325. Tess is standing by. She'll get your information. She'll send you out a little checklist of things to bring to your appointment with me, and we'll come in and meet together and go over everything. And then at some point, we'll of course bring Russ in and schedule an appointment with Russ as well. He can go over your estate planning. And this is, you know, one of the things to take advantage of. Russ is, how many, it's 30, you're 30
plus years.
Yeah,
yes.
30 plus years doing estate planning, his parent, and his family. I mean, he's like his dad, his granddad. I mean,
yes.
It's crazy stuff.
It is crazy stuff, especially when my kids look at it and say, "You don't expect me to do that, do you, Dad?"
So he's recruiting. That's
yes.
right. It's another 10 years, but yeah, they'll be ready.
Maybe the cat will do it.
So if you want to take advantage, Russ, again, board certified estate planning attorney, not a lot of those around, and I've been working with Russ for, as we said, 15 plus years, and in doing so, I've seen with my clients what happens with them. So I get to see, you know, when I've had clients go through different both this, you know, whether it's long-term care issues, family issues where we've had to deal with, you know, how to protect them, as well as what happens when they pass and how it's helped the family. Got to see how great his documents really are, how well they work. All right, we got to take another break. Join me here. We'll be right back on the Retirement Report. Do you have a